Story 1. Some background here. I'm a 28-year-old professional woman living in Australia who just finished a job that had me traveling all over and spending no time at home. I started a new job that lets me work proper office hours and have weekends to myself again. So, one weekend, I decided to take my baby, Dale, out for a ride 2008 Yamaha R1 with custom pearl white paintwork and go for a ride through the Royal National Park. Everything was going great, and I was having fun racing a few guys on Ducati and BMW motorcycles. Once we got to the other side of the park, there was a huge lookout over the ocean from a large cliff, popular with bushwalkers, hang gliders, and motorcyclists. So, there were quite a few bikes around. We all dismounted and started to chat when we noticed a highway patrol car pull up outside the parking area on the street. A few people were looking at the sports cars and bikes parked there. I noticed a girl about 10 or 11 eyeing my R1. It has a really nice stencil art of a lady holding a rose skull on both sides. So I walked back over to my bike, and almost immediately, her mother walked up behind her. So here is the cast. Nice girl. Entitled parent. Highway Patrol Officers 1 and 2. Ducati guy. BMW guy who is also a solicitor. Me. And this is how the conversation happened. Entitled parent. Do you know whose bike this is? Me, it's mine. Normally, it's just a show bike, but I really wanted to let him loose this weekend. Nice girl. It's so pretty and white. I just smiled at her. Entitled parent scoffs. No, it's not. Girls like you don't ride bikes like this. I was just shocked she said that right to my face. I'm 5'10", 75 kilograms, mostly thanks to my chest, and have a short black ponytail, so I'm not that butch looking. I then pulled the keys out of my pocket and started him up. Both nice girl and entitled parent jumped back when it roared to life because it has a loud exhaust. The entitled parent looked shocked and then turned bright red with anger. Entitled parent, how dare you? Are you trying to make us deaf? She then marched right up to my face. You stole this bike, didn't you, you smug witch? At this point, I was getting angry, and the other guys were looking over at me and her, starting to worry. Ducati guy came over and interjected. Ducati guy, is everything okay over here? Entitled parent, no, this girl has stolen this bike and is trying to make me and my daughter deaf with it. Ducati guy just gave her a puzzled look. Ducati guy, miss, I know this woman. We have been on many rides together, and this is her bike. As for how loud it is, there are many bikes here louder than hers. Entitled parent was steaming at this point. Entitled parent, no, she's a thief. This is clearly a man's bike. Entitled parent then noticed the highway patrol car outside the parking area. She then screamed at the top of her lungs. Entitled parent, police, police! The two highway patrol officers exited the car and dashed over. Highway Patrol Officer 1. What's the matter, madam? Entitled parent. This girl has stolen this motorcycle and was assaulting us with it. The two highway patrol officers looked a little confused. Highway Patrol Officer 1 took the entitled parent and nice girl, who was almost in tears by this point, off to the side, and Highway Patrol Officer 2 talked to us to get our side of the story. I then opened up the tail of the bike, pulled out the registration and insurance papers, and showed my license to prove the bike was indeed mine. Highway Patrol Officer 2 then took them back to the car to check them out. Meanwhile, the entitled parent was wailing at Highway Patrol Officer 1. A few minutes went by, then Highway Patrol Officer 2 approached Highway Patrol Officer 1 and the entitled parent. The two officers exchanged words for a minute, and then they both turned to the entitled parent. Her expression turned to that of a wild bull. The entitled parent then stomped back towards me and Ducati guy, threw her leg right between us, hitting my bike square in the fairing. The whole bike fell right onto the hard asphalt, crushing my helmet in the process. The two highway patrol officers rushed over, but not before I punched the entitled parent right in the face, while still wearing my Kevlar knuckle bike gloves. She hit the ground like a sack of bricks. Both Ducati guy and BMW guy were holding me back because they knew I would have beaten her badly. Highway Patrol Officer 1. Calm down, madam. While Highway Patrol Officer 2 was helping the entitled parent to her feet, he pulled out his cuffs and arrested her. Highway Patrol Officer 1 was getting his cuffs out as well, but then BMW guy interrupted. BMW guy, officer, if your intent is to arrest this woman for taking defensive actions against her attacker, You yourself can be subject to criminal and civil prosecution under certain legal grounds. I don't really remember the rest. It was a bunch of legal stuff. Highway Patrol Officer 1. Is this woman's solicitor? BMW guy? Yes. BMW guy then pulled out his business card and handed it to him. Then Highway Patrol Officer 1 went to help Highway Patrol Officer 2, while we were all left to look at the wreck that was once my bike. I was basically in tears at this point. That bike had been the one thing that helped me whenever I was feeling down or just had a bad day, and now it was smashed to pieces. After we all gave statements, we called a friend of mine to come with a van to pick up what was left of the bike. Later on, my mechanic told me she had done over $5,000 worth of damage to the bike. I won't list what was done because it's as long as this story. Long story short, the judge sentenced her to 2 months in prison, 100 hours of anger management therapy, and she lost custody of her daughter. I cannot say how much I won the civil case, but it was enough to build a few custom bikes. I honestly don't know what goes through the minds of such people for them to act like that. Story 2. All right, I have a story to tell from the finance industry. For those of you who don't know what we do, it's basically just being a realtor, but for companies instead of houses. This was a small investment banking firm, and we specialize in smaller players. We're talking companies worth $20–50 million. Our customers are typically salt of the earth. They built their tire company from nothing but a shed and a truck over the last 30 years, and now they want to retire. But seeing as how many of them never learned accounting and whatnot, they need representation. Now, one company has two 50% owners, and they hate each other. They can't have a civil conversation. Now, having two 50/50 owners is always a recipe for conflict. But this level of hatred was something I hadn't seen before. It was pretty clear one of the two had done something pretty bad for it to devolve to this stage. So, let's call one Tim and one Roger. My first impression of Roger is that he's a nice dude. Down to earth, chill, and generally interested in things. My first impression of Tim is that he's a raging imbecile. We were at a restaurant I, and many other people in my city, hold in very high regard, and all he did, for an hour and a half, was complain about the food. He talked down to and mocked a waiter who dared to ask him what he'd like to drink, and proceeded to order $1,000 worth of wine he knew we were paying. My boss, having none of that, made it clear Tim was paying for that bottle, which I suppose put him in a bad mood. I am somewhat obsessed with food. I spend an unwise amount of money on food. I can sing you all the instrumental parts in the opening to Heston Blumenthal's cooking show. We were there on my recommendation. I love this restaurant, and I am on first-name terms with that waiter. The man starts talking down to me about my taste after I order, says kids these days have no palate, and that I shouldn't be eating certain dishes. Oh, and also, apparently, donating to vaccine charities is a waste of money, and I am some sort of idiot for doing so. So, to be short, I don't like the guy, but not liking the guy isn't really a reason to seek revenge. However, after talking to Roger, we found out why they hate each other. You see, Tim had been stealing money from his employees and the company. It turns out employees started getting random checks bounced, and the company's lines of credit kept drying up. Because Tim had been making some rather extravagant purchases on the company dime. He had adjusted employee payroll downwards and increased his own. He had used capital expenditures to build himself a house. Apparently, his continued justification is that none of what he did was illegal technically true. He had helped grow the company, I suppose, and that he deserved more but not his business partner. Roger ended up compensating employees out of his own pocket, and Tim refused to pay back a dime. So, at this point, the deal talks were going nowhere. As in, Tim and Roger just could not stand to communicate with each other at all. But my boss hatched an idea. Why don't we just buy one of them out? We know how much the company is worth in the wider market. We'll just see if either is willing to take some cash up front for their share of the equity. I make models all day. I know how much this company is worth. It's worth about $24 million. Tim's stake is therefore worth $12 million complex. I know. Guess whose stake I suggest we buy? Tim, of course. How much do I suggest we offer? $4 million. Now, to be clear, this type of thing has a downside. But Tim's reputation in his industry isn't good. In fact, after some canvassing, it turns out that most people know this company through Roger and don't like to deal with Tim. Turns out being a thieving jerk is something one simply cannot turn off. Boss says okay, he'll send an offer letter and a non-disclosure agreement, etc. Tim bites for $6 million. We sold the company 6 weeks later for $28 million total. Goodbye, Tim. Edit. No, Tim was not happy when he found out. No, he could not do a thing about it. Edit 2. I should mention that my boss and a few of his friends pooled the money to make the purchase. They were not acting as part of the bank. Any offer they gave was part of private negotiations, as a counterparty. Tim should have hired his own bankers. He didn't. Story 3. I was working at the postal station from hell. A piece of rolling equipment got caught in a piece of broken tile, popped up, and onto my toe. It shattered the toenail. I was lucky not to have a broken toe from it, too. So, I was on light duty, which meant I had to work the service window where people come to pick up packages. Signature required mail. Fill out change of address hold mail forms, stuff like that. Remember, I have a foot injury. This means that getting around is not easy for me. A customer came in about an hour before closing. Handed over 2 pick up your mail forms for certified letters. You probably don't realize this, but in big city facilities, we don't have your certified mail sitting in a gold case all by itself, with postal workers staring wistfully at it, wondering when we'll see you. No, we have your mail sorted out by the last number of your street address in trays with hundreds of other certified letters just like yours. This means it can take quite a while to find your mail when you finally drag yourself in to pick it up. So, I went looking for these 2 letters. It was recent enough that I checked the stand-up cubby we had for the latest certified to pickups. Ugh, not there. So, I hobbled to the longer-term storage area, about 10 feet from the door. I finally found both letters and went to the window. The customer told me that he wanted to talk to the postmaster because I took 3 minutes to get his mail, and that was unacceptable. I tried to convince him to get the party more likely to be on the premises to handle his complaint to supervisor. But nope, he was adamant about speaking to the postmaster. Hint, people, the later in the day it is, the less likely the postmaster will be there. But okay, you want the postmaster? You get the postmaster. I smiled and told him, sure, I'll go get him now. And I shut the Dutch door. With his mail still in my hand. You thought 3 minutes was a long wait. Ha, you just activated a union worker trap card, bub. Now, I did go to the postmaster's office first, but, as usual, he wasn't there. Still, I made a good faith effort to look there. I didn't see him on the floor, either, so I checked the dock, conveniently getting in a smoke while I was out their nasty former habit. I checked the break room and got drank a soda while I was there. Knocked on the men's room door. No answer. Oops. That soda just worked its way through me. Need to use the ladies' room now. I was about to check the parking lot to see if his car was even there. Oh, look, there's the postmaster, coming back from an off-site meeting. I took the time to bring him up to speed on the customer's complaint. This guy knew me and smiled. Postmaster, how long have you kept him waiting now? Me? I think it's been 25 minutes. You can deal with him while I handle the paperwork. Postmaster, this will be fun. You're lucky I like you because you're a hard worker, though. The customer was absolutely livid when the door finally opened again. He demanded that I be fired right then and there, as if that's how it works in a union job. My boss, to his credit, chewed out the customer for being such a jerk to an injured employee who had actually done a great job in taking only 3 minutes to find 2 letters amongst hundreds in 2 separate locations. He even took one of the trays over to the ledge, slammed it down, and said, "See how long it would take you to go through this to find not 1 but 2 letters, and then tell me 3 minutes is too long." Lesson to be learned. Union workers don't have to take nonsense off of dirtbags. We won't, so spare yourself a whole lot of grief and chill out. It's only mail, for crying out loud.